I've got a reasonably serious introduction to do to my next guest, although she is anything but. Well, she's a serious person, but also she's good fun. The fact is that fashion designers and retailers in Australia are facing one of the toughest periods the local industry has ever seen. It seems that fashion has become a luxury for many Australians who are struggling to meet the increasing costs of living. And today we speak to Australia's golden girl of the fashion industry. Please welcome Miss Prue Acton. Lovely to see you.
Nice to see you.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Prue, that is, I mean, with the beautiful smile that you've got, it doesn't look as if it is bad news for the fashion industry in Australia, but it is a pretty rugged time for you guys, isn't it?
It is, and it's not all bad, of course. However, I think that if we're silly enough to say, well, look, it's terrific, like rag traders usually do. Heard a gorgeous story the other day about a fashion guy who was known as a liar in the trade. And even he said, oh, it's bad.
So it must be really bad.
It must be bad.
What's gone wrong, Prue?
I suppose what happens in fashion is perhaps it's not the highest priority if you're paying off the interest rate, and there's nothing left when you paid off your home loan. It's not all bad either. I think names like mine are doing well, and there's some up-and-coming ones doing well. But fashion can suffer the first, and especially high fashion, because we're probably selling to the people who know what's going on. Unemployment tends to lag behind a recession.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
One thing I've noticed,
hopefully
though,
we're not having a recession.
Well, no. Well,
and if our lovely politicians listen to what's being told to them by everybody, i.e. do something about cost of home interest and a few taxation things which would not be the end of the earth, if they'd only listen to what everyone's saying,
Prue, you know,
we
as well
won't
as
have a recession.
You know as well as I do, politicians will listen, but do they hear?
Aha.
That's the important thing. What about the imports? Are they a problem to you?
Not so much to me. Imports are very important because we really don't have the infrastructure, and I don't think it's just fashion, by the way. I think it's all manufacturing, and fashion might show it up before it happens to everyone else. At the moment, I keep hearing stories from factories, ad after ad after ad, and nobody wants to come and work. Now, what's gone wrong? There's supposedly still 6% or so unemployment, but you can't get anybody to answer an ad. So we're suffering from no staff.
Well, what's the solution there? I mean, that's a pretty deep question and problem, isn't it?
It is, isn't it? I think the costs of employing trainees, whilst there's lots of government help and so on, is still very high, and the on-costs of employment are very, very high. I mean, what people take home each week and what it costs the company to pay for that person to be employed is so different, it's mind-boggling.
You talked about politicians before. Have you ever considered going into politics yourself?
Absolutely not.
Why not?
What a thankless, hideous thing to have to do, to lie. I mean, they have to be professional liars, don't they?
Yeah, but I think it's a pity that people like yourself and Bob Ansett and John Elliott...
We all do it behind the scenes a bit.
Yeah, I suppose that's just as important, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, what sort of political motivation do you have? I don't mean party-wise, but what's your belief for Australia? What would you like to do if you were Prime Minister and had power?
Well, I think we've been sitting on inflation for 10 years, and it's hurt us all 15 years now, I think it is, since about 72. And what that's done is everybody who's had money in the bank has had to pay interest on it, which hasn't covered the cost of inflation. So, in fact, I think the government has been stealing our money for 15 years. They've been ripping us off.
What can we do about that? Because we're talking about two parties, aren't we?
Well, I think both parties. It's about time. I mean, Senator Button came out today, and he is an honest politician. He's about one of the only ones. The only one I trust, I think. One of them. He came out today and said, look, he said maybe there's a chance that we can index taxation for inflation. In other words, because really the OEDC says, you know, those people over in Europe who sometimes get it wrong, say we're not in that bad a shape. But perhaps if we were to do something about our savings level, but we're not idiots. None of us sitting here are stupid enough to put our money in the banks when you're going to be taxed on it and you're not even going to keep up with inflation.
Prue, when you started out in the industry, did you believe that down the track, you'd finish up doing things like designing the uniforms for the Australian team for Los
no,
Angeles. I mean,
no.
that must have been real pie in the sky for you.
Yes, I never thought of it at all. I think the first one I ever did was Expo in Osaka, and that was great fun. And then, of course, I did Montreal and Lake Placid, and Montreal was great, Los Angeles and Seoul, and it's been fantastic.
Somewhere in the mists of time, I've forgotten, how did you exactly start out? What was the first big break for you?
Well, my parents went to New York and they took a collection of clothes, and the next thing I know I was under licence in New York at the prime age of 20, which was amazing. And of course, as it's still true 20-odd years later, that was the big break for me, because while I'm sitting in New York and doing my number in New York, of course a couple of journos came and interviewed me, and Darren Hinch's ex-wife, Lana Wells, she came and saw me. And the next thing I was front page in Australia. It's still true, I think. You've still got to make your name offshore before you're recognised here, unfortunately.
What about the young designers of today? Do you hold out much hope for them?
Well, I think if we don't get our act together as far as being able to manufacture in this country, and we certainly can if we mechanise, you know, if we put millions of dollars into computer technology, we can produce things in this country. But if we're relying on labour-intensive industry, I guess that will go offshore. So therefore our designers, and that's not just fashion designers, I guess will become just that, and we may well end up designing to produce out of, well, even Hong Kong's expensive, and who knows, Singapore or Korea or wherever, New Zealand, and so we can still keep designing, because I think we're terrific. I think that the styling wise, it's fantastic.
There's a freshness about Australian designs, isn't there? And you know, and
stunning.
certainly I'm sitting beside the person who has been as responsible for that as anybody else in Australia. For so many of us here in this country, Prue Acton, the name is synonymous with all that's good in fashion. It's been lovely talking to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Prue Acton, ladies and gentlemen.